Right now, in this moment, the person you lost is still aware of you. Not in some distant heaven, not gone, not dissolved into nothing. They're in the middle of something real, something urgent. And the fact that you clicked on this video tells me you already sense that. Somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the silence they left behind. You feel it. They're not finished yet. Edgar Cayce, a man who gave over 14,000 documented readings while in a deep trance state, described what the soul goes through immediately after death. Not in vague metaphors, in precise, almost clinical detail. And he said something that changes everything. The first 72 hours after physical death are the most critical window any soul will ever pass through. What happens in those 3 days shapes where the soul goes next, how it heals, how it rises. And here is the part that will either break your heart or set it free. Possibly both. What you do, what you feel, what you say to them in these hours. They receive it. All of it. If the person you love passed recently, this video is urgent. If they passed years ago, stay. Because understanding what they went through will change the weight you carry today. Let's walk through it together. Slowly, carefully. Because this isn't information. This is a map of where they've been. Part 1. The moment of departure. It starts quieter than you'd expect. Not with light. Not with trumpets, not with anything the movies taught you to imagine. It starts with a lifting, a heaviness that has been pressing on the body for hours, sometimes days, begins to dissolve. Slowly, layer by layer, like someone peeling a blanket off skin that has been cold for too long. And then there's a shift. Edgar Cayce described this across dozens of readings, and the message never changed. The soul does not leave the body the way you pull a hand from a glove. It unfurls, it expands outward, like warmth rising from a candle just extinguished, still holding the shape of the flame, still glowing before it drifts. And here is the first thing Cayce wanted the world to understand. At this moment, the person you love is not confused. They are not frightened. They are more aware than they have ever been in their entire life. Think about what that means. Every spiritual tradition describes death as a crossing, a river, a door, a bridge. But Cayce didn't use those metaphors. He described it as waking up, as if the entire physical life, every morning alarm, every argument, every embrace, was a vivid, meaningful, important dream. And now the dreamer opens their real eyes for the first time. But, and this matters deeply, the experience of this moment is not the same for every soul. It depends on what they carry inside. Their beliefs, their attachments, their fears, their capacity for love. All of it crosses with them, every ounce. And if you're sitting there thinking, they died in pain, they died afraid, they died alone in a hospital room at 3 in the morning, and I wasn't there, I need you to hear this. Cayce said that the moment of separation is accompanied by a presence. Not a human presence. Something larger. Something that has been with the soul since before it was born. And in that moment, no matter the circumstances of the physical death, no matter how sudden, how painful, how lonely it appeared from the outside, the soul is met. They did not leave alone. They could not have left alone. That is not how this works. What looked like solitude from your side of the veil was something entirely different from theirs. Hold that. We're going further. Part 2. The first hours. So the body has been left behind. The soul is free. But here is what surprises almost everyone who encounters Cayce's readings for the first time. They don't leave right away. In the first hours after physical death, the soul lingers. It stays close to the body, close to the room, close to the people it loves, and it can perceive them with startling clarity. The newly freed soul can see the grief of those left behind. It can feel their pain. And in many cases, Casey described this repeatedly, the soul desperately tries to communicate, "I'm here, I'm okay, please hear me." But the living can't hear it. Not with their ears. Not yet. This is one of the most heartbreaking details in all of Casey's work. Because the soul, in those first hours, is caught in an overlap. It exists in two states simultaneously, still tethered to the physical world by emotion, by habit, by love so strong it acts like gravity, and yet already beginning to perceive the larger reality opening before it. Casey compared this to the way a newborn exists in the birth canal, not fully in one world, not fully in the other, suspended between. And if you've ever lost someone, a parent, a partner, a child, a friend, what Casey is saying is that in those first raw hours of your grief, the person you lost was right there with you, not metaphorically, not symbolically, right there, hearing your words, feeling your tears, wanting nothing more than to let you know that the worst thing you fear, that they are simply gone, is not true. Now, the soul is lingering, the silver cord still holds, and the life review has not yet begun. But something else is happening in these early hours. Something Casey documented that most people never hear about. The soul is trying to reach you, and sometimes it succeeds. Part 3. The signs, how souls reach through in the first 3 days. Casey documented specific ways that souls communicate during this critical window. Not abstract energy, not wishful thinking. Concrete, physical phenomena that the living can perceive, if they know what to look for. And across his readings and the case histories surrounding them, certain patterns appeared again and again. The woman and the cardinal. There was a reading Casey gave for a woman named Margaret, a widow barely 48 hours into her grief. Her husband had died suddenly, a heart attack, no warning, no goodbye. She told Casey she felt nothing since it happened. Complete numbness, as if a wall had gone up inside her. Casey, while in trance, described something remarkable. He said her husband's soul had been trying to reach her since the moment of his passing, and the specific vehicle he was using was a bird. A red bird that had been appearing at their kitchen window. Margaret went silent. Then she said, through tears, that a cardinal had been sitting on the windowsill every morning since the death. She had noticed it. She had even thought it was strange. But she had dismissed it. Casey's explanation wasn't simply, that was a sign. It went deeper. He said the soul, in its newly expanded state, can influence living creatures, particularly birds, which exist at a vibrational frequency closer to the etheric plane. The cardinal wasn't a symbol. It was a channel. Her husband was using the only instrument available to him to say, "I'm right here. Turn around. Look." The scent that had no source. Another case involved a young man who had lost his mother. 3 days after her passing, while sitting alone in her empty living room, he was suddenly enveloped by the scent of gardenias, his mother's perfume. There were no flowers in the house, no open windows, no explanation. In a subsequent reading, Casey explained that newly transitioned souls can sometimes project sensory impressions into the physical world. Most commonly smell, because smell is the sense most directly linked to emotion and memory. The soul selects the scent deliberately, not at random. It chooses the one thing the living person will recognize instantly, the one thing that will bypass the intellect and strike the heart. The song at the impossible hour. A third account involved a father who had lost his teenage daughter in an accident. He described waking at exactly 3:17 in the morning, 3 days after her death, to the sound of her favorite song playing from a radio in the hallway, a radio that had been unplugged for weeks. Casey's framework explains this through the concept of etheric energy manipulation. In the first 72 hours, the soul retains enough connection to the physical plane to influence electrical systems. Radios, lights, phones. Not because the soul is haunting anything, but because electromagnetic fields are the thinnest barrier between planes. The daughter wasn't trying to frighten her father. She was using the only door she could find, and the song wasn't random. It was a message. Not in the lyrics, in the choosing of it. The act of selection itself was the communication. I still know you. I still remember what we shared. I'm still your daughter. The temperature shift. And finally, the simplest sign, and perhaps the most common. Casey noted in multiple readings that a sudden, unexplained drop in temperature in a specific area, particularly near the body or in a room connected to the deceased, is one of the most reliable indicators of a soul's presence in those first days. Not a draft, not a window, a cold that seems to come from nowhere and surrounds you like a pocket of winter air. This isn't random atmospheric change. It's displacement. The etheric body of the soul, as it hovers between planes, draws thermal energy from its immediate surroundings. You feel cold because they are there. So if you've experienced any of this, if a bird appeared where it shouldn't have, if a scent filled a room for no reason, if a song played at an impossible time, if the air around you suddenly went cold in the days after someone died, I need you to understand something. You are not imagining it. You are not desperate. You are not seeing what you wanted to see. You are being reached deliberately, lovingly, by someone who wanted you to know that the wall between you is thinner than you think. And if you have a story like this, if something happened in the first days after you lost someone that you've never told anyone because you were afraid people would think you were crazy, I'm asking you right now to put it in the comments. Not for me, for the person who will scroll down and find your words and realize they're not alone. Your story might be the exact thing someone needs to read tonight. If you leave something from the heart, I'll pin it so others can find it. Now, the soul has been lingering, reaching, trying to be heard, but something much larger is about to begin. Part 4. The Etheric Review. Your Life as a Mirror. Now we enter what might be the most extraordinary phase of the first 3 days. Edgar Casey described a process that many traditions have referenced, but few have explained with the same precision. Some call it the life review. Others call it the panoramic vision. The name varies. The experience does not. Shortly after death, the soul begins to re-experience its entire life, not as memory, not as a highlight reel, as a reliving, every moment, every choice, every interaction with another human being. But here is what makes Casey's description staggering and entirely different from the simplified version most people have heard. You don't just see your life from your own perspective. You experience it from the perspective of everyone you ever affected. Let that land. That moment you snapped at a stranger in a grocery store. The soul feels what they felt, the sharp sting of being dismissed, the small wound that stayed with them the rest of the afternoon. That time you held a friend's hand through their darkest night. The soul feels that too. The flood of warmth, the overwhelming relief of not being alone. There is no judge in this process, no courtroom, no gavel. There doesn't need to be. Because when you feel the full impact of your own life, every ripple you sent into the world, received back as direct experience, judgment becomes unnecessary. Understanding arrives on its own, and with it, a feeling Casey described again and again, a desire, deep and wordless, to do better, to love more completely. Now, This might sound terrifying. The idea of reliving every mistake, every cruel word, every selfish moment. Who wouldn't be afraid of that? But Casey was emphatic. The life review is not punishment. It is a gift. It's the soul's way of teaching itself, of integrating every lesson the life contained. And the experience, while intense, is held within a presence of such overwhelming compassion that the soul never feels condemned. It feels understood. Think of the most loving person you've ever known. Someone who could see you in your worst moment and still recognize your worth. Multiply that by infinity. That's the closest language can come. The soul is now deep in its review, seeing its life as it truly was. But the physical connection has not yet severed completely. Something ancient still holds. Part 5. The Silver Cord and the Point of No Return. Ancient texts across many cultures describe something they call the silver cord, an energetic thread connecting the soul to the body during life. Some traditions say it extends from the crown of the head. Others place it at the navel or the heart. Casey acknowledged this cord, and he said something extraordinary about its role in the first 3 days. During the first hours, even the first full day, after physical death, this cord remains intact. The soul is free, yes, but still anchored. And this is why the first 3 days are so sacred. The soul exists in a state of heightened sensitivity. It is both liberated and linked. It can perceive the physical world with unusual clarity. It can also begin to perceive what lies beyond. Dimensions of consciousness most of us only glimpse in dreams, in meditation, in those rare moments of transcendence that stop us mid-breath. But at some point within the first 3 days, the cord dissolves completely, and when it does, the soul crosses a threshold Casey described as irreversible. Not frightening, irreversible in the way that birth is irreversible. You cannot return to the womb, and you would not want to. The dissolving of the cord coincides with a shift in awareness so profound that the soul stops perceiving the physical world as primary. The room, the body, the grieving faces, they fade. Not because the soul has forgotten, but because a new reality is revealing itself, one so vast, so vivid, that the physical world begins to seem like a dimly lit hallway the soul once walked through. The cord has broken. The review continues, and now the soul enters a space that Casey spent more time describing than almost any other dimension of the afterlife. Part 6. The Borderland, Between Worlds. Casey spoke extensively about what he called the borderland, a realm that isn't quite physical and isn't quite fully spiritual. The twilight of consciousness, the space between dreaming and waking. In this borderland, the soul encounters familiar things, places it recognizes, faces it loves. Not because these things are physical, but because the soul attracts them from its own memories, expectations, and inner state. This is why people who have near-death experiences so often describe seeing deceased relatives, beautiful gardens, light-filled spaces that feel like home. These aren't hallucinations, they're real, but real in a way that transcends physical matter, built from the raw material of consciousness itself. And here is what fascinates me about Casey's description. He said, the form the borderland takes depends entirely on the soul. A soul filled with love, with genuine spiritual seeking. That soul enters a borderland of extraordinary beauty. It is met by guides, by loved ones, by presences radiating warmth. A soul consumed by fear, by guilt, by attachment to material things. That soul experiences the borderland differently, not as punishment, as reflection. The borderland mirrors what the soul carries. Carry rage, and you encounter storm. Carry unresolved grief, and you find yourself in a muted, gray stillness, not hellish, but waiting, as if the soul must process what it holds before it can move forward. carry love. Real, unguarded love. The borderland opens like sunrise. This is one of the most profound implications of everything Casey taught. The afterlife is not something that happens to you. It happens through you. Your inner world becomes your outer world. The mask falls, the pretense dissolves. Whatever you truly are, the beautiful and the broken, is revealed. There is nowhere left to hide, and that, Casey said, is exactly the point. The borderland has revealed the soul's true inner landscape. And now the process of release begins, the part that determines what comes next. I want to pause here and speak directly to you. As you're hearing this, is there a moment from your own life that surfaces? Something you did or didn't do that you've carried silently for years? Something you wonder about at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet? Because according to everything Casey documented, it matters. All of it. Every moment you think no one noticed. If this is reaching something inside you, even something you can't name yet, I'd be grateful if you'd hit subscribe. Not for the algorithm, for the person who will find this channel 6 months from now, in the middle of the night, searching for a reason to believe that death is not the end. Your subscription pushes this toward them. You may never meet them, but you will have changed their night. That's how this works. Let's continue. Part 7. The second day. Deepening and release. As the soul moves through the second day, something remarkable begins. The emotional intensity of the life review softens, not because the soul forgets. It never forgets, but because understanding begins to replace raw feeling. It's like what happens when you finally process a grief you've been carrying. There's a period of searing pain, and then slowly, something shifts. The pain doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes wisdom. It becomes knowing. Casey described this phase as a time of release. The soul begins to let go of its attachments to the physical world. Not with violence, not with sorrow, with a kind of tender acceptance. Imagine holding a handful of sand. You've been gripping it your entire life. Your possessions, your identity, your routines, your body, your name. And now, finger by finger, the hand opens. The sand doesn't fall. It drifts, returns to the earth, and your hand feels lighter than it has ever felt. That's the second day. But Casey also noted that this phase can be deeply challenging for souls intensely attached to the material world. Souls who built their entire identity around wealth, appearance, status, or sensory pleasure may struggle here. Not punishment, but releasing what defined you is hard, even when what awaits is infinitely greater. And this brings us to something Casey said that might be the most liberating idea in this entire video. Many of you carry guilt about how your loved one lived. Maybe they struggled. Maybe they were angry or bitter or afraid. Maybe their final years weren't peaceful. And you think, if the afterlife mirrors the soul's inner state, then what does that mean for them? Here is what Casey said, and he said it with more certainty than almost anything else in his readings. Struggle in life does not condemn the soul. Struggle is how the soul learns. A life full of difficulty, of pain, even of mistakes. That life is not a failure. It is a curriculum, and the soul, once freed from the body, sees the curriculum for what it was. The bitterness falls away. The anger dissolves. Because the soul finally understands why. Your loved one's hard life was not a tragedy. It was preparation. And the release happening on this second day is proving that to them right now. This is why Casey counseled the living to begin practicing non-attachment now. Not because material things are evil, but because clinging creates weight the soul carries across the threshold. The lighter you are when you cross, the further you can rise. The soul is releasing, growing lighter, and on the third day, it arrives at the threshold that determines everything. Part 8. The third day, the soul finds its level. The third day, the culmination. The moment Casey described as perhaps the most significant in the entire post-death passage. The silver cord has fully dissolved. The life review has completed its deepest work. The borderland has been traversed, and now the soul, fully freed, fully awake, moves toward what Casey called its level. This is not heaven and hell, not a binary. It's a spectrum. Casey described the afterlife as a realm of many dimensions, many planes of existence, each vibrating at a different frequency. And the soul, upon completing its 3-day transition, naturally gravitates toward the plane that matches its own. A soul rich in compassion, in seeking, in love, that soul rises to a plane of extraordinary light and creative power. A place where learning continues, where relationships deepen, where the soul begins to comprehend its true nature within the architecture of creation. A soul weighed down by cruelty, by willful harm, by persistent refusal to grow. That soul descends to a lower plane. Not punishment. Resonance. You go where you vibrate. You experience what you are. And here is what makes Casey's vision so much more hopeful than the rigid frameworks of eternal damnation. No soul stays in a lower plane forever. Growth is always possible. Even in the darkest corner of the afterlife, there are guides, there are helpers, there are paths upward. Because in Casey's cosmology, the entire universe operates on one fundamental principle. You are meant to return to the source, to the divine, to the infinite creative intelligence from which you came, and nothing, not your worst failures, not even death itself, can permanently prevent that return. The soul has found its level, but its work is not separate from yours. The connection between the living and the dead is not severed. It is transformed, and this is where the teaching turns back to you. Part 9. Why 3 days? The sacred pattern. Before we reach the close, there is one more layer I want to open, because the number 3 did not come from nowhere. 3 days. Think about how often this number appears across the world's spiritual traditions. In the Christian tradition, the central event of the faith, the resurrection, occurs on the 3rd day. For 3 days, the body lies in the tomb. And on the 3rd day, transformation. In ancient Egyptian belief, the soul undergoes a 3-day process of judgment and purification in the underworld before entering the realm of Osiris. In Tibetan Buddhist practice, the Bardo Thodol, the Book of the Dead, describes a transitional period immediately after death where consciousness navigates between states. The first phase, the most disorienting and luminous, spans approximately 3 days. In Jewish tradition, mourners observe a period of intense grief for the first 3 days, during which the soul is believed to hover near the body. And in the indigenous traditions of countless cultures, from Australian Aboriginal practice to various Native American nations, there are rituals specifically designed to guide the soul during its first 3 days of departure. Casey did not see these parallels as coincidence. He saw them as confirmation, as if humanity, across all its divisions of language, culture, and geography, had been independently discovering the same truth for millennia. 3 days. That's how long the crossing takes. That's how long the soul requires to fully release the physical and open to the infinite. The fact that so many traditions arrived at this number independently, from opposite sides of the earth, tells us something that goes beyond any single reading, any single teacher. It tells us this knowledge is embedded in us, in the fabric of what we are, somewhere beneath our thoughts, beneath our doubts, beneath the noise of daily survival. We know what happens. We've always known. We've just forgotten. And perhaps that's what moments like this are really for. Not to teach you something new, but to remind you of something ancient that you carry in every cell, waiting for the moment you're ready to remember. Every tradition on earth confirms this same window. And that universal agreement points to something Casey returned to more than any other subject. The relationship between the living and the dead is not ended by death. It is the living who must learn how to hold it. This is the part of these videos where I feel closest to all of you, because I know some of you are thinking about a specific person right now, someone whose absence still sits in your chest like a stone that never dissolves. If that's you, this channel exists for this exact moment. If this video has given you even 1 minute of relief, hit the like button. Share it with someone who is grieving. Drop a comment telling me who you're thinking of. Just their name, if that's all you want to say. I read everyone, and if you leave something from the heart, I'll mark it with a reply so others find it. Now, let's bring this home. Part 10. The Bridge of Grief and Love. How the Living Honor the Dead. Casey didn't only speak about the dead. He spoke about you, the one left behind, the one still breathing. And he said something that might be the most important thing I share in this entire video. Grief is a bridge. When you mourn someone, you're not just expressing sadness. You're extending your consciousness toward theirs. Your love, your tears, your memories. They reach across the divide, and the soul on the other side receives them. But, and this is essential, Casey warned that grief can also become a chain. When mourning becomes obsessive, when it refuses to soften, when it locks the living in a state of permanent anguish, it doesn't just damage you. It makes the transition harder for the soul you love. Because that soul, especially in those first 3 days, is still sensitive to your emotions. If it feels you drowning in despair, it may resist the natural pull toward its higher destination. It may try to stay closer to the physical world longer than it should, not out of choice, but because it cannot bear to feel you suffer. So what did Casey suggest? How do the living best serve the dead? By grieving fully, and then releasing with love. Cry, mourn, feel every ounce of your loss. But then, when you're ready, and only you know when that is, say something to them. Not out loud, with your heart. Go, be free, I love you. I will always love you, and I'll find you again. But right now, go. Those words are not abandonment. They are the greatest act of love a living person can offer a departing soul. Permission to rise. Instructions for you. So now you know what Casey spent his life trying to tell us. The expansion, the lingerings, the signs, the life review felt from every angle, the silver cord dissolving, the borderland shaped by the soul's own inner truth, the release, the finding of one's level, and the sacred 3-day window that every civilization on Earth has independently recognized. But knowledge that stays in your head changes nothing. So here is what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not someday, tonight, before you fall asleep, when the house is quiet and the screens are dark, close your eyes. Place one hand on your chest and say their name, out loud or in silence, it doesn't matter. Just say it, then picture them. Not in a hospital bed, not in a casket, not in the last hard image your mind keeps replaying. Picture them free, lighter than air, surrounded by something warm and immense that you can't see but you can feel. Picture them looking back at you, not with sadness, but with the kind of love that doesn't need words. And then tell them one thing, just one. Whatever you never got to say, whatever has been sitting in your throat since the day they left. Say it. They will hear you. Not because I say so, not because it's a nice idea, because 14,000 readings, spanning decades, delivered by a man who had no reason to lie and nothing to gain, all point to the same truth. The people we love do not end. They do not vanish. They do not forget us. They hear us. Still. So tonight, let them hear you. And then, let them go. Not forever, just far enough to fly. One hand on your chest, their name on your lips. That's where it starts.